Thank you. And I'm not going to take too much more time because I know everybody is hungry. And I'm somewhat glad that we have only a few people to share the secret that I have to tell you. And the secret is that everything that you've heard this morning is actually wrong. And I'm going to tell you the truth about what's going on with the financial crisis and what the solution is. There is no way that the financial growth go-go days of the 90s and the last 50 years are coming back. It's not because we don't want it. It's not because we have good intentions. It's not because we have bad policies. It's for a very different reason. Economic growth of the last 50 to 100 years was a predatory growth, predatory on the environment. The environment has now reached its boundaries. On 3 of the 9 major boundaries of the environment, we are already exceeded, and we are destroying other parts of it. The figures that you're seeing over here of 5-fold growth in economy are not physically possible, let alone economically being possible. So that's not going to happen. So what's happening is also something that you saw in the charts that our friend from Italy showed, which was that there's going to be moderation of growth, and that moderation is actually already happened. Japan has been in the so-called lost decade where they have had a -2 to +2 growth rate. Europe, you've heard too many numbers about Europe. Everybody knows Europe is in a degrowth mode. United States is in a degrowth mode, and with 103% or 105% debt, it is not likely to come out of it. So let's be honest and acknowledge that we need to manage degrowth. Degrowth of the GDP, not degrowth of our lives, not degrowth of prosperity, not degrowth of happiness. We can grow in all of those. We can grow in community, we can grow in happiness, we can grow in well-being, but we'll have to manage it. And in order to manage it, what's the solution? It's the solidarity economy. And the good news is that the solidarity economy already exists. It exists in all countries, and it exists in small and large organizations. So you have cooperatives, you have consumer-owned things, you have labor-owned businesses, you have government-owned organizations which constitute this economy. In the country that I now represent, Canada, the so-called solidarity economy, I just want to give you a little bit of numbers here. If I can pull it up on my presentation. Canada alone has 200,000 organizations in the solidarity economy. $90 billion in revenues, employs 1.3 million people. This kind of an economy is a labor-intensive economy. It allows more employment. We are sitting in a world with 400 million unemployed. If we don't go to the solidarity economy, there is no way we are going to find employment. If we go to the industrial automation, the 100 years old models of economics, we are not going to reach there. So I think the only solution is the solidarity economy. Quebec, where I come from now, I live in Montreal. Quebec has the largest solidarity economy in the world in an advanced industrial country. So those of you who are in Europe or in the North American context, I'm not talking China, I'm not talking India, those are very complex worlds in their own, but for the West, the solidarity economy offers a model that you can actually exist as a global operation economically, well integrated with the global economy, and yet provide high levels of employment, high levels of social benefits, high levels of happiness. And let me then end by saying that the challenge facing us today is not trying to revive something that is on its last legs, beating a dead horse, trying to build this industrial economy that is past its time, it is predatory on the environment, it's destroying the environment. The real opportunity lies in boosting what we already have in the cooperative sector, in the solidarity sector. There are 3 or 4 things that we in Quebec have learned that work. First, that it has to be driven by a community political will. In Quebec, we have created an infrastructure of laws and cultural practices that allow the solidarity economy to take root. One simple example, we now find ourselves in Montreal that we have only 2 days food supply in our supply chain. If the Lake Champlain bridge falls, we will be starving in 2 days. So the community wants to build an urban agriculture system. And in order to encourage that, there was a law passed 6 months ago. Anybody can grow anything in their own garden, in their apartment, and you can sell it on the corner of the street without a license. A way to build urban agriculture. This is one small example. There are 300 of these things being put into place. That's what it takes to get the solidarity economy in place. And then finally, the issue of patient capital. You cannot build solidarity on a short-term basis. Solidarity is a long-term commitment. And so you need patient capital. In the case of Quebec, the patient capital comes from the biggest cooperative bank, Desjardins Group. And we need to find other such sources to build the solidarity. I'm sorry, I don't have much more time. There is a paper available for those of you who would like to read it. And bon appetit.